All right. Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to 2023 and a new year of the NFL GMs. We've had a pretty exciting and pretty surprising playoff here, ending on a bit of a somber note last night. We'll talk about that a little bit, but otherwise, wanted to get the gang back together here now that the playoffs have basically concluded and have some conversations about the upcoming season, some potential changes we'd like to see, or other ideas that might make the league better. Usually these don't really lead to much, but it's fun for us to talk about anyway. And if nothing else, gives the commissioner some ideas to continue storyboarding over the year to see if it's something that makes sense going forward. But enough of just me laying things out here. It's good to have RJ and Bill back on the pod, gentlemen. How are the holidays?
They were fantastic. Just glad to be back on the pod. Also,
Yep.
really nice to see we are very close to being able to trade again, and that's exciting.
Yes, it feels good to be back, uh, close to doing stuff again. But yeah, happy New Year, everybody! And yeah, it was a interesting start to the holiday or to the New Year, I guess.
Yep. So again, we'll kind of start things off with the playoffs. Definitely an exciting set of games here. I know we've been sans pod for a couple weeks, but ended up coming down to the Dolphins as your representative from the AFC facing off against the Buccaneers from the NFC. Bucks finally putting an end to Brett's reign of terror in the NFC Championship. And Dolphins, despite not having Jalen Hurts, having enough firepower with the rest of his team to take down Goose in the AFC Championship. So, great season from all four teams. Congratulations on getting to your respective championships. And then, of course, congratulations to the Buccaneers for taking it down, it looks like. Obviously, there's some non final aspects of it with everything that happened last night. But for all intents and purposes, it looks like the Buccaneers are going to be our champions, which is, again, pretty impressive to his point, considering I think it was a year or two ago, he was basically in the basement of the NFC South. So can turn around that fast. A couple good trades, a couple smart acquisitions and signings, and bing, bang, boom, you've got yourself a title-winning team. So I'll give you guys a chance. Any major points or comments you want to make around basically the final four of the playoffs?
Oh, congrats to the Bucks. Congrats to the Dolphins. Uh, Brett didn't win again, so we can keep the league around for a year or two longer.
Yeah, I love the run for. I know it didn't work out at the end, but I love the run with the Dolphins, literally making it through the gauntlet without Jalen Hurts the whole time. Man, that was crazy.
It was just a disaster. Like the playoffs as a whole was a disaster because it seemed like the vast majority of teams just didn't have a quarterback.
Yeah.
Which, like, I don't know, it spiced things up for the playoffs. That made it interesting.
Yeah.
But I don't think I wasn't even in it, and I don't think any of us want to do that again.
Right. No, yeah, it's interesting. I remember we were all talking about how Jeremy should be looked at as the favorite if he had Lamar, and it wouldn't have made a single bit of difference. He would have ended where he ended, like because he got blown out by Atlanta in the second round. But yeah, this was just so different. Very fun year, and then I guess next year it's back to holding off the NFC South again.
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of good teams are still on track to should be good next year. I think there may be some trades that we see made here because of some contract situations, or some tough times people are going to have executing some extensions or fifth year options. I think this is one of the. Was it this year or is it next year that we get the first fifth year options really taking hold?
It should be. Oh,
I
we
think
should have already got him this
we've
year.
gotten a round, but this is the year whenever like a shitload of big names go into effect.
Yeah.
So I think between the fifth year options, everything like that, again, to be noted that We should get a decent-sized cap increase this year versus what we got last year, since, of course, the COVID year kept us relatively flat. This is more of a regular bump, so I expect the cap to be a little bit generous to help with that, but definitely some things to consider there. But again, good end of the season, with the exception, of course, of last night. I mean, we talked about this, the three of us, before we got going on the pod. So not to be somber, but again, it's impossible to not mention the fact that we're going to have a little bit of a challenge to end the season here due to the events of the Bengals and Bills game. Again, of course, everyone is praying for the best for Damon Harmon as he recovers. But as I think anyone who's followed any of the medical side of this, this is not going to be a speedy recovery. So we may not know where he sits on this week, next week, or in the playoffs. But all you can just kind of continue to hope and pray that everything turns out the right way. The comments we've gotten from Jeremy and Chris, our commissioners, are despite NFL making some rulings, they're going to give it a little bit of time here, because we have a little bit of time to see what ends up happening if the game gets played, or how things might get impacted from that. By all means, considering basically we're done with the season, doesn't hurt us to kind of wait and see how things go. But again, based off of how many points were left and what some of the different players would have to do, it's tough to see Dolphins making up that gap, or the Chiefs making up that gap against the Falcons. But we'll wait and see what happens. Appreciate the commissioners being quick and decisive in terms of how we're going to approach this unprecedented situation. And again, I'm sure they'll keep us in the loop as anything else happens. Before we move on from the topic, though, RJ, Bill, anything else you want to say about the whole thing with the Bills and Bengals game last night?
Well, I think our finals is kind of decided. I don't recall any running back ever putting up 70+ points, and so I don't see Devin Singletary doing that. And that's the only player for the Bills or Bengals that Dolphins has. Second and third place, or third and fourth, that might be a little bit different. Haven't really kept up with that game.
I mean, that one's kind of decided as well. I think the games are they're all well in hand. I think that the only issue we run into with, the skill positions of the game is average.
All that stuff. We don't have to get into it. We don't have to worry about that until what? February?
I mean, whenever rollover happens, but
right.
It's just the only thing that really seems to be impacted by them playing or not playing is just weekly average. And does that keep a guy at 19 when he should be at 20, or does it move a guy down to 22 when he should be at 17? Like, that's all. I mean, they did the right thing by not playing. And
100%.
I fully expect them to say it's just going to be a tie. They're not going to play it onto the playoffs we go. But I think that the only thing that really impacts for our league is just point per game average.
Yeah,
that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way. So kind of making sure that's set before we reopen. Trading allotment for extensions or things like that, I think makes a lot of sense and is really a great thing I haven't thought of. So good point there, gents. But speaking of things we haven't thought of, the message and kind of topic for today's conversation is ways that we might be able to improve the league by things that we, or maybe the commissioners, hadn't thought of or had, but maybe deserve a second look. So what we're going to do is we're just kind of going to take turns thinking about a couple of things that we think might make the league more fun, things that would be improvements to the overall user experience, things that might simplify overall management of the league for our commissioners, things like that, again, would just make what I consider one of the most fun leagues I've ever played in even more fun. So it's the old Red Queen paradox. If you stand still, you're falling behind. So That's the idea of this, is continuing to improve our experience and see if there are things that make the overall experience this more sustainable and engageable. So I drew straws before the podcast, so I'll throw out the first idea here. One of the things that the commissioners put into place when we first started the league was something to protect against sort of salary dumping, where you've got a bad contract, and instead of either being forced to carry the contract, cut the player, and just kind of deal with it, they were concerned that someone might cut the player and then re-sign him for a lower cost, therefore generating an overall savings and still maintaining control of the player. I think one of the things that we've seen happen is, especially with in-season signings, that just a single year, and especially with trade extensions being, less and less used and disappearing after the trade deadline, there's an opportunity to take a look at revisiting that rule with the idea that if you cut a player and they pass through a entire cycle of claims, of waiver claims, as well as first come, first serve, that the team would be allowed to reacquire that player. And my thought process there is, if the overall purpose is to make sure that you prevent a team from getting a bargain or saving money on a player that would be of value, that the market should identify that player's hit the wire and either bid on that player in a claim or bid on that player in first come, first serve, and prevent that from happening. But if that doesn't happen and the player just sits there, you shouldn't be precluded from being able to acquire that player if things change, or again, he's still there after a couple of weeks. I think it might be over-rotating on the reason it was there in the first place. So that's my first suggestion. I'll pause there and let you guys comment on what your thoughts are on that.
So I think that's smart. I think that the result of reacquiring a player should be one of either two things. One, there is no discount and it goes right back to the salary you had him at. Or two, you take the full salary that you had as a penalty and then you get the new salary added on. So there's no benefit to reacquiring the player. It's just you have the ability to do so if you want to. That's just a thought, but I don't see a reason why we should be precluded from bidding or free agent claiming. But I think there should not be a benefit to it at all.
Taking the full 100% plus something else, like off of 100% of the original contract plus 100% of a new contract, might be a bit much. But that might be the only way to, make it unappealing if this situation were to arise.
You could also do it where you get the full contract back unless you bid over what they initially were at, and then you have to pay the new full salary.
That one sticks with me, like that it just reverts back to the original contract.
Yeah.
Because that also is very much a deterrent.
Yeah. Because they still have the cut penalty.
Right, but it's one of those things. Say somebody cuts a wide receiver that they view as disposable. Say somebody cut a Cole Beasley, and didn't even bother to put him down as being a retirement. And then a few weeks later, he comes out of retirement and he's still sitting on free agency. When news changes about a player, it may be appealing enough to where I would take that contract back, type of thing.
Right. Sure, absolutely, and I understand that, but we're also talking about like the 1 in a million situations, right? Like Beasley was useless all season except to the last couple weeks. If he was even in a starting lineup, I don't even know.
But, his scenario is a little bit different than the exact thing.
For anybody, right? Like But if you're willing to reacquire them, it's probably because you
Something has changed.
yeah, you got an injury and you now have the room to take on all of it, or you need to get that person back. Like if it's an accidental drop, like if you're like, oh shit, I clicked Najee Harris instead of
No, if
Giovanni
it's
Bernard.
an accidental drop, that
Yeah,
those
you get
things
your guy
get
back.
fixed.
You get your guy back as long as you tell one of the commissioners within like a very quick amount of time, like an hour or less kind of thing, then that's fine. But yeah, I think like if you're intentionally dropping a guy to get rid of him because you don't want him anymore for whatever reason, I think you should have to take some sort of financial loss to reacquire.
All right, so maybe I'm on my own a little bit on this one. I liken it more towards what tends to happen. It seems like at the end of every training camp, where you get a slew of veterans that are not worth their contract to that team anymore, so they'll be cut, but they'll be reacquired at a lower cost.
So so to that idea, what if we just added another version of contracts? Like we get three extensions. Why we could get three re-editions as an idea.
That sounds like it's getting a little bit
Of
too
course it is,
complicated.
but it's just an idea. I mean, the
It's
more
another
work
thing
from
to track.
Jeremy and Chris, the better.
I mean, the sitting on the 50% penalty plus having to take on the extra like the secondary contract seems like the most reasonable thing.
That was my suggestion. I can understand if people would want something more in there. I use, for example, like a Cole Beasley or a Chase Edmonds, for example. I cut Chase Edmonds, who was a $6.3 million player this year, was not performing to that. Then he gets traded to the Broncos, and I can't bid on him with that change. Or if in this proposal, I would have to take him back at my full contract. It's almost putting me in a disadvantage because I owned the player and cut him versus just being forced to hang on to the guy in the first place. So it's one of those where I think there's some room for improvement in the way we do that, but it sounds like it's something that would need to be kind of workshopped a little bit. Isn't necessarily ready to go into play right now.
Would let me ask you both: would you guys rather have the penalty sit on your books the whole season and take the new contract, or would you rather have the penalty wiped away, go back to the original contract plus like a 10% bump, and then be able to trade or drop again with no existing penalties staying? But the trade off is you have to take on 10% extra of whatever you sign them for.
I mean, I think the other aspect of the first piece here is if you're dropping someone and requiring them, there's also the fact that you're only able to put them on a 1-year deal right now. So really the value long term for that isn't necessarily there. It's kind of more of a temporary value versus what you may have had in a multi-year deal beforehand with the situation change. So really only impacts more of the trade extension market. So again, we spent about 10 minutes on this. I don't know if we need to workshop the entire time on this, but that was my suggestion of something that could make some sense to go into a little more detail on. We'll move on to another one. RJ, is there anything that kind of pops to mind for you that you'd like to see adjusted in terms of how we are sort of either managing the league or managing an aspect of the league that you think could be improved?
I just want to find ways of getting more extensions. So the things that I had thought about were being allowed to extend somebody that was claimed in season or acquired in season. So like essentially one waiver extension annually, and then like adding years to franchise. So basically, I just want to add more years to the players that I want to hold on to. But I think some ways like some things like that might be appealing if done correctly. The one that kind of sits with me the most is like being able to add an extra year to a franchised player. But like only being able to do it on a franchise tag. So no other tag. So you have to pay the highest premium for that player, but being able to add, more than just 1 year. So you're not necessarily renting that player for another year.
Would you still permit renegotiation on that player?
So my initial thought would be yes, but if I took longer to think about it, I don't think allowing renegotiation would be good. I think the best way would, like, the only way that you could do anything would, like, if you wanted to extend them past those 2 years, would be that you'd have to, like, use a regular extension.
Mm-hmm.
So very minimal percentage drop or like gain just in a general sense,
Yeah.
but you're already paying a premium for those players.
Yeah.
Because like in theory, like if you're tagging a big player like that, like you're either tagging like a veteran, a productive veteran that you're essentially fine with renting for X amount of years. So like you could basically use your tag on them for multiple years and pay them that premium anyway. Or it would be somebody like a middling age, like a 25, 26-year-old that still has like upside. And with those type of players, you should be forced to have to pay the premium or what should be like their assumed like peak as far as like production to be able to hold them for an extended period of time.
Yeah. I like the idea of the add years to the franchise tag if you keep them. I also like the concept of like if you how do you make the franchise tag player more appealing to where people are willing to give up more than one first?
Why should they be appealing though?
Well, no.
Oh, you're talking about appealing for the other players that could be trying to acquire them.
Yeah, like you give up Keenan Allen and you tag him as a franchise player. What makes it appealing to me to take him on at $45 million for 2 firsts? Like, right, like the ability to renegotiate or something, right? Like would be awesome. You know,
Right.
what am I going to gain from, you know, losing $10 million over 2 players to take on 40 for one? The idea of being able to renegotiate that player down to half salary would be
Well,
pretty appealing.
So in that sense, there shouldn't. The player themselves, like I think it's more just the example that you give. So like in a
Yeah.
Keenan Allen, it should be the player and what they bring production wise. Like you should be okay with paying that inflated price and that draft pick to have that player on your team. My thought is more of like the there's guys that were franchised recently, like some of the defensive tackles, a couple of other players like linemen that were like 26, 25 years old, that it's like they aren't the best at their position, but like you'd like to hold on to them to see if they hit their peak. But like they're also players that should be out on the free market getting inflated contracts through free agency. So like you should be forced to still have to pay an inflated like
Yeah.
deal.
I just wish there was a way to make it more appealing because like you'll never see a top 10 pick moved for a franchise tag.
No, but I mean you like in that sense you shouldn't. Like adding years to that franchise player shouldn't make that appealing enough to get a top 10 pick.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I guess there's really no way to make it more appealing to give up your pick to get the guy at the high cost. You know,
Well, you're either getting a player that's young enough to where you view they can mature into that higher end player, or it is a higher end player in itself. Like that is what the tag is used for.
yeah.
I mean, as of right now, the tag's only used for those veterans that are like super productive because of the fact that you can't add 1 year and you would just have to tag them year after year after year. So like a Keenan Allen, a Zadarius, somebody of that nature. But if you could tag uh um uh I don't know. I'm trying to look at it, but all I'm doing is looking at scores.
So here's an idea: is if you tag a player, if you give someone a franchise tag, and again, I'm trying to go based off of NFL rules.
Mm-hmm.
If you give a player a franchise tag on your team, you are allowed to extend that player before the franchise tag goes. And again, we'd have to think about how often you could do this or things like that. But you would be allowed to extend that player before the franchise tag went final, but you have to do it using Pro Bowl rules.
Interesting.
So it can't be a matter of, okay, I'm going to use the franchise tag to, add a couple renegotiations to the process, but okay, I'm going to franchise tag this player, but before the tag goes final, I'm able to do it at a Pro Bowl rule. But then post tag, once you've won the bidding, the winning owner, whether it be the guy keeping the player or the team winning them, has the option to, again, also renegotiate that player using renegotiation rules. So the idea being that you should be eliminating some of the need to eliminating the folks who would try and just use it for an extra renegotiation based off the Pro Bowl rules. And if it actually stuck, you might get some value pieces that are actually worth some of those picks that we're talking about. But at the same time, if you win it, just like anything else, like, okay, I'm going to franchise tag this player while I negotiate an extension for him, it allows you to do that as well. So it allows you to keep your player. It allows more bidding on there by potentially more players of value hitting the tag area. And then it allows you to add years instead of just being, okay, I'm going to tag this player, and then I've got to pay him $40 million for a year, and I still have to trade him at the end of it.
Right. Like, okay. So I found some good examples. Like on my team, I have Will Harris, who's 27 years old, relatively productive safety. There's no sense like he has one, like he's expiring. I'd love to hold on to him, but there's no sense in me tagging him because I'm only going to get one more year. Like I want more than a year. Would I pay an inflated cost in the hopes that he is the safety for Detroit for the next 4 years? Yes. But would I pay that inflated cost just for next year? No.
So again, I think there's something we can do there to incorporate a little bit more of what's happening today into the league and some of the pricing to allow some extensions to take place, and sort of the, okay, we're going to put this person with a franchise tag until we can extend them approach. We have to do it in a way that it's not, completely mind numbing and it's easy to calculate. But I think it'll lead to more action on both the tag market and more extensions, which again needs some more trades.
Yep. Yeah. I think the key with any of the suggestions is like streamlining it. So like,
Sure.
like if it's easily like retainable, like how it changes, that's the biggest thing. When it gets into like adding layers of like, we need another Google document to keep track of this and this and this, like it gets really hard to go, we should do this.
Yep. All right, Bill, what ideas you got?
All right. So I can't believe it took till me to say this one. But I have two. One's very quick. Trade czar. Got to have one. We need to make that happen. But two, I think that players that have been on a team's taxi squad, if traded or if traded away and reacquired for whatever reason, they should be able to go back onto that team's taxi squad. I ran into this situation with Tyler Huntley earlier this year. Had him on taxi, traded him away, ended up reacquiring him, but couldn't put him back on taxi. Messed up my whole situation because the whole point of getting him back was to put him on taxi again. But yeah, I just think that seems pretty simple and fairly logical.
I mean, I'm of two minds of it. I think there's an aspect of the NFL where players are activated, cut, then re-signed to the taxi squads and stuff like that multiple times in the season, where it's impossible for us to add that level of movement and policing of this without this becoming a full-time job. So I can understand why the commissioners have it as once you're promoted, you can't go back down for a simplicity standpoint. But there may be a way to kind of mimic that movement from the NFL. So I see the reasoning of why. I see the potential improvement. I don't really have a good answer for this, but I see why it is the way it is, and I think it can be improved, but I'm not sure if it needs to be.
Yeah.
But the trades are absolutely. I think let's define the role. Let's put the role out there, and if you want to have it be rotating so that it's not always the same person, and that way you limit the potential power or abuse of or otherwise, then it makes a lot of sense. It's just one more person to help the commissions through the number of things that they're doing to help make this league as fun as it is.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you would like somebody that already knows the back end of MFL, so they can just go in, process it, and be done with it. I mean, not really a back end, but you know what I'm saying. The other login method as a commissioner, because you don't want somebody that's like new to that, fumbling around, not knowing what they're doing.
Yeah.
There's benefits to it. I would like it for the convenience of like processing things during business hours, or school hours, I should say. But I have no, like major issues. I understand what somebody else being able to log in as a commissioner, like what that worry can be. So I jokingly, I will always say yes in the chat, but like I'm not going to be distraught if we don't have one.
Right.
Look, if there's one thing that was going to get the commissioner is in here in some form of representation, it was going to be trade czar. So well done, Bill. You triggered Chris to the point where he was able to join the pod.
Fantastic.
Is that what's going on? I haven't been listening up to this point.
Yeah.
So that's my other suggestion, by the way, is having a weekly Commissioner's Corner podcast where they both get on and talk about whatever they need to talk about, and we can all hear their inner workings.
That's really not how management works. We prefer to work in secret and not let anyone in on in the details. So yeah.
Look,
You can type trade czar all you want, but that's pretty low on our possible things we could approve this offseason.
Fair enough. So the suggestion so far, Chris, has been looking at a sort of in-season expiration period where if a player's gone through a round of waiver claims and free agency claims, they can be reclaimed by the original team, because that would give others an opportunity to get that player, and it wouldn't just be a cut to get the lower cost. Then we had some discussion around, again, trades are discussed, the ability to re-sign players to your taxi squad discussed, and then RJ's discussions were trying to find additional ways to extend players, whether it be while they're on the tag and leveraging the tagging of things, or if there's some way of designating in-season acquisitions, a certain number of them to be able to be at least a multi-year contract in case you wanted to try and extend them in some way, shape, or form. So those are the ideas so far. Not sure if those are any that are going to get you to stand up and say, holy shit, that's a great idea. But at least some things that we think that would definitely make the league a little bit better.
Sounds good. Some of those sound interesting.
Yep. And again, some might be a little bit contradicting. I think the thought I had around being able to reacquire a player, part of the reason for that is, okay, you're only getting them on a 1-year deal. if you do that and the multi-year contract, it's sort of self-defeating. So some of these may end up being relatively mutually exclusive in their proposal. But again, ideas we think are worth considering to start with. I had another one that I was thinking about, but then I lost my train of thought here. I've got the Niners game from last week on in the background, and I was distracted by shiny things. So a idea that was out there that, again, probably is a quick decline by the commissioners, but could be fun to keep those of us entertained and engaged that aren't in the postseason, is to allow trading to take place for eliminated teams, but there's no adding or cutting allowed as part of those proceedings. That you are required to keep all players on a roster as part of these trades, but you are allowed to engage in trading once you're eliminated from the postseason.
I think the only issue with that is you can't. Can you pick and choose who's allowed to do trading? Like, can you turn off trading for particular
can.
franchises?
Yeah, you can.
We can.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And again, that's just kind of, I don't know, if I remember correctly, you can decide what powers each team would have. So you could say, okay, Bill has the ability to trade, but not add, drop, IR, things of that nature, so that players couldn't be cut.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's hilarious just because of the wrinkles that it adds for like the traders. Like, somebody comes to me, hey, I'm interested in this IR player. Well, you're shit out of luck right now because I can't theoretically promote him to trade him.
Well, you could still trade him off of IR, I think, right?
No, in theory, they get promoted before they get traded. Because that's why we have those weird, like, invalid trades when, like, some trades actually do work, is because
That's
like,
true.
it works off of the assumption that this player gets promoted prior to the movement.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know if it ever actually happens in the sense of like a transaction, but I know like when it's trying to do the salary like math of it, it's working off the assumption that that player is promoted.
So a few fun things for you guys. We keep a commissioner notepad as the year goes on, where we bounce ideas back and forth on things to review in about the upcoming week and a half we're going to have here soon. So anything I talk about here, it doesn't mean it's being changed, but it does mean that it's something we've been looking at going up here. So a couple things we've already mentioned: the cutting and re-adding players. That's something we're looking at on whether that's necessary. If it is, how long? So again, you guys have already had ideas on that. I don't know if you've talked about the 1-year trade back clause or not. I know we've discussed it on other pods that we've gone through. It's something we're looking at. One potential change we do is everything resets at the end of the championship. So when that essential season concludes, not the rollover date, but the actual conclusion championship, we just wipe whatever. So we still have a trade back clause during the year, but once that season completes, we let people trade again potentially. So again, none of this is confirmed as happening, just things we're looking at. What's some other fun ones we're looking at? We got boring stuff in there like cleaning up bylaw language and crap like that, so that's not important at all. One thing that we are going to take a look at on the numbers is how comp picks are awarded. Right now it's a pretty broad language on top 20, top 30. Again, if you're looking at that by a per position basis, it's a lot easier to get comp picks for certain positions compared to others, just based on the number of players that are eligible to play in those positions per given week. So again, nothing earth-shattering, just minor things here and there.
Has there been any talk to adding second-round comp picks instead of thirds?
You watch your
No.
mouth.
Nope. There's been no discussion on that.
I mean, I like that because those are all things that make sense in the construct of the NFL. There aren't second round comp picks in the NFL. We don't need second round comp picks in our league.
Boy, the type of names that would hit free agency if we did, though.
Right.
We've got a few. Okay, so one thing that's interesting is we don't have anything solid on here. We're discussing how tags work currently. One of the unintended benefits of tagging players is the fact that you can it essentially protects a player from holding out as well. I mean, so if you take somebody in the real life, they can't hold out, right? So in here, like the idea is a player wouldn't like being tagged, but last year we've had more tagged players than ever before to be retained. Think we're probably a year ahead of time before we change anything. We'll probably let it sit another year. But as we get more active owners, we've seen the number of tags increase dramatically last year compared to previous ones. So we're keeping an eye on that. And quality of life thing we're looking at is how we limit extensions between rollover and the rookie draft. So again, anyone that's been in the league for a while knows we made a change. Not sure if it was last year, 2 years ago, where extensions wouldn't be processed between rollover and rookie draft because we needed to set the market again. We're potentially going to clean that up a little bit so that only extensions that would look at other salaries would be affected. So we'd still let extensions go through that don't rely on the current market price of players. So again, nothing earth-shattering, just something that's a little bit of quality of life, less things to keep track of, where we let you declare something, but then you have to wait weeks or even months before it goes into effect.
I do really like the point around the franchise tag protecting from holdouts, and frankly, that real world, the franchise tag might actually trigger a holdout rather than prevent one. So I do like the idea of potentially just adding all franchise tags to the holdout not calculator or whatever the chooser that Jeremy does is, but anyone who remains on a 1 year franchise tag deal goes into the franchise the holdout calculator, the holdout selector, and is eligible to potentially hold out as well after getting tagged.
I mean,
yeah, the odd thing with that in our league is our franchise tag already puts them up in like the top percentage, close to, or if not equal to, what a holdout would do anyway. I need to look at that again.
well, that was why like my suggestion was to be able to add like a year to like the highest, like just franchise tags. Like you have to pay a premium.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because like we said, and like Chris, you weren't on here, so I'm just like basically restating it. But like a lot of those, like in real life, they lead to like large contracts, like multi-year deals. But like even if that player isn't like top 10, like but relatively close or like expected to be that type of player, like they get a healthy contract. So like something like being able to add a second year to a franchise, and then like their next extension, the only thing you can do, like you can't renegotiate that. It can only be extended for like percentages up and down, like minor percentages. Like that's
Yep.
like that almost mimics how like a real life like contracts happens.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, sure, like the extra layer of us having to do the franchise tag and then another extension, but like obviously we can't have everything. You know, we don't have like human to human interaction,
Right.
so we
Yep.
have to alter it in some way.
yeah,
We could start up a whole NFL Players Association group of this league. You can have so we can argue with those people and have to come to an agreement.
Non-owner participants that are just
Yep.
representatives for players.
Are we
Yep.
moving to Real GM or whatever it was? I know there's an NBA league that did that. That basically you compete as either an owner or as an agent, and
Yep.
you get fantasy points for players on your team doing well, but you also get fantasy points based off of contracts and points from players that you represent. So I forget the inner workings of how it worked, but I think it was like Real GM or something like that.
Yeah, if we don't think it's complex enough already, we add that in. Something for you guys to spitball a bit. Unlikely to make any changes this year, but we have noticed how, and this has gone on for multiple years, how the cap floor is essentially gamified. So you wait till the week before the cap floor is enforced, and then you bid $90 billion on a player just to meet the floor. So that is, again, unlikely for any, well, can't say never, but if there's fun ideas that actually make sense, from again, add a little bit of realism to how the cap floor should work in this league. That's something that would be fun for us to source some input from on that. One nice thing right now, well, nice or not nice, depending on who you are as an owner, is it does mess up your renegotiations and your Pro Bowl contracts and whatever. If somebody hasn't cut a player that's got a $90 million salary, the unrealistic side of it makes it a little less ideal. So again, it's trying to balance realism versus usability from an owner side.
The simplest way is in-season acquisitions that are cut before the end of the season is a full contract penalty instead of half.
Oof.
So now when Julius Chestnut's cut for $90 million, it's a $90 million penalty.
Or whenever who the fuck was it that Pats picked up and cut like a day later? Back.
Yeah. So my thought process is it can't be completely like you can't kill every like way of doing it.
Nope.
Because then you would have to do like a salary restriction on what you can taxi and like various things like that. But just as simple as like an in-season acquisition when they're cut is 100% penalty. Like that kills the majority of those type of interactions. So you are only like your only way of getting around it is by taxi squad, and then like I don't really know how to prevent it that way, but it like that gets rid of a lot of the avenues where that's possible.
So
The drawback to that is that would decrease free agent activity as the
Right.
season progresses in general.
Right. I do agree.
Are you guys trying to avoid the $80 million player, or just let's just like
we're not trying to avoid the $80 million player. We're always looking at ways. So two things we look at. One is how similar can we be to the actual NFL, and then on the other half of it, on anything we look at is how much does this increase interaction or fun within the league. So we're always balancing realism versus interaction and a good experience for the owners. So right now, it's okay with how our cap floor works, but it's something we've identified as, hey, we might be able to find something that works a bit better. That's a little more realistic. That doesn't kill interaction in the league.
So
because the cap floor in theory is to prevent like the just a ridiculous tanking, having like nothing asset wise on your team. And still being able to be the like scapegoat for everybody else, like in the league.
So another idea is we could just say, you can't have more than X% come from one individual player when calculating the cap floor. Again, if we had something like that, it's more manual work for us, but we're only checking cap floor twice a season.
So my suggestion to that was going to be kind of interesting. Might be more work on your guys' part, I don't know, but either maintain a cap floor all season and not just like every year, not just like twice a season. You could increase it consistently as the year goes on. So like instead of doing it towards the end of the year, have one at like week 3, week 6, week 9, like that kind of thing. Like do them throughout the year. Just keep increasing it. to get where you want, or just have it a requirement to have a certain amount of players on your team. Like not just a starting lineup, but like double the starting lineup. You have to have that on your team.
I mean,
But
the
it's
league.
just they just add free agents at that point.
Yeah,
right?
but it
Yeah.
still goes towards the cap, and that would help with the cap side of it. It would also allow for more flexible trading because like if they're required to have something.
Or the percentage of non-minimum contracts
Yeah,
on a roster.
They can have like 5 450s.
You're right. I think it's definitely something worth noodling on. I think there's something to be done there in terms of either allotting a max contract based off of the current player at your position. So, for example, you can't sign a defensive tackle for more than Aaron Donald is, and you establish that value earlier on in the season.
No player in no player in waivers can be bid at higher than 150% of the highest paid player at that position.
Or I like the idea of potentially there being a jealousy factor. So, for example, okay, if salary floor gets calculated, someone's getting paid a lot more than I am. That increases the chances of you having to hold out the next calculation or something like that. I don't know if there's a way to do that.
I mean,
Yeah, the third thing we don't mention that we do take into consideration is how much extra effort this does
Right.
lay on the commissioner.
you could do.
for
I
everything
mean,
we had.
you could do a theoretical, like not like a financial strikes on owners to where like they become they have like they are less likely to, or they are more likely to have holdouts. Like you hit a certain amount of strikes and you're just 100% on holdouts at that point.
we could go ahead and just go all full Monty. Like the past 4 years, players take into account the records of the teams that they're playing for, that increase or decrease odds for holding out, and how much money they want to play on a more successful team.
I don't hate that.
That would be so cool, but it'd be such a pain in the ass to do.
If you're walking into holdouts like, yeah, I got this guy, but you only have 7 wins over the past 3 years, you have a 93% chance of him holding out.
Nope.
So yeah, I think there's definitely something there.
God, it would if MFL had more like, man, you could do a lot of fun stuff. Like turn it into like Madden franchise mode, essentially.
Well, so I mean, I guess the only other alternative here is like full on outright blatant tanking is not permitted, and then everybody has to maintain a competitive league.
What's outright tanking? What if somebody offers you value for all of your players and you trade them away?
Yeah, there's no way to.
Well, no, I'm not saying. I'm not like, I know that tanking is like incredibly like hard to gauge. It's very similar to collusion. It's like almost impossible to say this is outright collusion or this is outright tanking. It just is what it is. Your team sucks or doesn't.
Unless RJ goes at it.
Right. Right. Yeah. Exactly. So it's just one of those things. Like the only way to like really enforce like a cap floor or salaries consistently is just to make it. You can't tank. You have to have points every week, kind of thing. Like just go from there. It's not a good idea by any stretch. It's just the thought that came to my head of like, well, that's kind of the only true path to it.
As I progress through this year and blow everybody's mind while I try to put up 12 points for the season, I will let you know what things would inconvenience me around the cap floor.
Are you back to full like basement level?
No, I say that very jokingly.
I mean, he's 9th in 2024. You may as well just keep going.
But I have Marvin Harrison Jr. in my sights. So I think that's either going to be the one or the two.
So another idea that could be, too harsh or painful, I don't know, but we're a GM's league and not an owner's league. GMs, if they do have a poor performance, can be fired. So
yeah, that's what I want to do. Increase turnover in this league. You're starting off strong.
Relegation.
So let me finish. If you are fired from your GM position, you're put in a pool to again
Oh my
basically choose a new franchise.
Oh, I'm getting fired every couple of
Oh,
years.
so
God.
like Broncos
There's a-
gets fired, Steelers gets fired, Eagles gets fired. We get to pick between the three teams.
There's a pool of 10 people that would be fired every year.
Yeah.
So again, so say it's Black Monday. There's what like 6 to 8 coaches that get fired, or 6 to 8 GMs that get fired. Those 6 to 8 teams have to choose a new franchise.
Oh man, how great would that be? We implement it this year. I get fired after getting all these picks, and then I have to go to some team without without draft picks.
Just
Did
like
they
real
go-
life,
did they-
man.
Do they go to a dispersal draft in that situation?
No, that would be too complicated to try and do in that form, I would say, especially if there are new owners in here to ask them to participate in a dispersal draft when they're just trying to understand the league would be just asking for trouble. But again, you end up in a situation where, if you're outright tanking, if you're doing things like, not hitting the salary floor or things like that, you increase your chances of getting fired. And if you get fired, then you get thrown into a random selection for picking a new franchise. And kind of similar to what happened to RJ, you just make a move to acquire a shitload of draft picks. You get fired, and you get sent to, like, again, I'm using him as an example. I mean, I'm sorry for saying this. You get sent to the Bears, where you've got a situation where you're quite stuck in the middle again, and you don't really have a whole lot of draft capital going forward. So that may be a nice anti-tanking approach there. Or you may end up with some really twisted owners in this league, which I think we probably got a couple of, myself included, saying, shit, I want to get fired. I want to go to a different conference and have a different experience playing with some different owners here.
There you go, Chris. That's actually a great way to avoid the tanking situation. Have 33 owners, and every year the worst team gets kicked out and replaced by the guy who's sitting out that year.
Yeah, I'll take it under consideration. I cannot stay long tonight, boys. I'm gonna have to jet, but want to drop in, say hi. Thanks for the pods, gentlemen.
See you, Chris.
All right, we'll see y'all.
See,
on the notion of being like bad teams, there should definitely be like a toilet bowl.
No, I don't want to have. I don't want to be the shittiest team in the league and then try to make an effort to win just to get an extra.
No,
extension.
I don't know what you would win, but like, just give us something to do.
well, I mean, at the
Yeah,
end of the day,
let us trade. Put us in our own little sandbox and let us play.
and again, it's trying to stay with the theme of this is supposed to be a
Realistic.
representative view of the NFL. So that clearly wouldn't represent the NFL, but
we should include head coaches. Like, I don't know how we would do. I don't know. I've never played in a league with head coaches, but we should play with head coaches.
Nope.
And then they get fired, and that Black Monday's a thing.
Oh, okay. You're talking about like as a player asset.
Yeah, like every year. So like this year, you had Nathaniel Hackett fired, but you have all the assistants in the wings as well.
Yeah, MFL has that program, and they do scoring for it.
Yeah, they have a scoring system. I don't know how it works. I've never done it before, but yeah, I think
basically the same as having extra kickers and punters.
Right.
Gotcha.
Is how they get treated. They don't get treated as you hold on to this asset. It's a kickers and punters type thing.
I gotcha.
Or you overvalue to a point where they're overpowered.
Yeah. I don't know. It would just be something fun to do. Just like have an offensive lineman. Just generally. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but again, I think it would have to be individual. It couldn't be like, okay, you have the Oakland coach, or you have the New Orleans coach. It would have to be.
Oh no, it's definitely like Sean Payton, Josh McDaniels, that kind of thing, for sure.
Because then I appreciate there would be a potential aspect of, okay, so I've got Kyle Shanahan and D'Amico Ryans gets hired as the new coach for a team. I would get the equivalent comp pick for that player because he would be coach of color getting hired, and therefore, just like the NFL, I would get draft compensation for that.
Oh, like so your coaching tree gets hired, you get the reward for it, kind of thing.
Right. Like
That's cool.
give it some form of dynasty value so that it's not something that ends up just as okay, Indianapolis kicker traded for Seattle kicker because they want to save $5 or avoid buys or things like that. That there's some form of dynasty value of that player being on your team.
I think if that was to ever be initiated, I think the easiest way to do it is just the teams get the coach that they have at the moment, and then you get fired or you don't, go on from there. But I don't know if that's going to happen at all. Probably not. Just an idea.
Right. Brandon, you've been part of this conversation, but been listening for a lot. What ideas do you have?
I don't know if I have any new fresh ideas, but I did enjoy the thought of like capping free agent bids at whatever percentage of the current max at position. I think that makes a lot of sense, just as a way of like keeping the market at least somewhat realistic. I'm always fishing for a sister league. If we wanted to relegate like division losers to the sister league or something, that could be interesting. But I think there's not enough appetite for that.
No, fair points. And again, I think it's kind of some of the suggestions that we've seen other places here too is how much do we want to deviate from a NFL themed league is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah. And you can't forcibly take teams away from people, like unless they're being inactive. Like you can't be like, oh, you were an active owner, but you didn't win X amount of games. Like here, go play in this other league. Like that,
It's a relegation league at that point.
So something that I like the idea of, it's kind of counter to the idea that Chris put in front of us is, being able to roll over your cap is a real thing in the NFL. And I think they've already said, yeah, I'm not interested in that. But I think some form of cap rollover function that would allow you to take your cap and roll it over from season to season. I think we've got spreadsheets to already track current teams' caps, and we would have to just figure out how rollover would be calculated. But I think that would be an interesting thing to allow for cap rollover of teams, similar to the way the NFL does it.
Yeah, I think if we do that, we'd have to consider like contracts completely guaranteed. And so if you were to cut someone, you're eating that entire salary. Otherwise, think of like a tanking team that acquires a shit ton of assets and now they're rolling over $100 million in cap space.
We still have the floor, so
Yeah,
the math
sure.
you'd be able to do is again what the floor would be. You'd have to do something to kind of balance that. But
could you imagine doing all that work for a year and having like your excess cap just wiped out by the floor?
Right. So again, it's something to think about there. Again, not something that's quite ready for prime time, but I think there's something for that. Again, I know people bring up every year the idea of being able to eat some of the cap in a trade or stuff like that, similar to what like NHL teams do. I think we're probably a little bit further away from that, and that's going to be something that's a lot more difficult to implement. But again, something worth probably some further mediating.
I mean, yeah, you're right. It is because like it's not a burden to like put a note of a cap penalty on somebody, but it's burdensome to like alter a player's contract hit for a year and then like have to. All right, now they go back up to this amount of millions of dollars.
Well, again, it would just be another tab on a spreadsheet, which again is a pain. But again, right now there's a rule that basically says you are not allowed to trade cap, and that would be directly changing that rule. So, just one of those things that a little a gate that you'd have to cross through to try and get that implemented.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that because there are workarounds in the NFL with those things, and we can mimic them.
All right. Any other ideas, crazy or otherwise, folks have been thinking about in terms of league improvements
Let us trade right now.
besides the obvious?
I can't think of anything specific, but yeah, this was fun. This was a good one.
Yeah, I just got the itch to trade. That's it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we all kind of do. I think we're all kind of in that spot where we've all finished a lot of our championships and we're waiting for payouts. Obviously, you don't want to blame a situation as tough as what's happening with Damon, but in real life, that's likely delaying payouts and delaying trading in a couple leagues. So, completely get that. But again, I think the idea here is let's continue to think of fun things that can make the league better. Let's keep thinking around, challenges we see or problems we see. And frankly, I'd say one of the most important things right now is listen to what Chris and Jeremy said. It's not the most fun thing to do, but take a look at the bylaws and see if there's anything that is kind of coming across as either tough to understand or open for interpretation or in use of cleanup, because this is the time to do it. It's not in the middle of the season where it's like, well, that could be cleaned up or that could be made more clear. That's not a helpful suggestion. The helpful suggestion is let's clarify it now. Let's identify the problem now, and let's get it fixed so that we're all in a better position for the next year.
Agreed.
One thing, I joined late, so I don't know about it, but I always think the rookie contracts seem undervalued, especially at the top of the draft. So that would be one thing that I would be curious to explore.
I mean, I think they're on the same scale as the NFL contracts, right?
Roughly.
I think like pick 101 is making I think they're making more than like the 80% or whatever that we're doing. Maybe that's incorrect, but it always seems like it's.
Well, there's always a factor of they have offensive linemen and we don't.
Yeah, right. Which is why I said the 80%, whatever the actual figure is.
Yeah. I think it equates to whatever it's supposed to, but yeah, I mean, I'm never going to be against like a slight increase to rookie deals to make them, more dollars towards a cap goal. But it has to be for a good reason, not just because.
You guys just want to punish the teams with all the draft picks.
No, I don't. Not at
Should
all.
be punished. Absolutely.
The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Now we're talking.
All right. Well, we'll cut it there. If there are ideas folks have outside of the pod, by all means, let's post them on the message board so that the commissioners have a chance to take a look and add them to their notepad for conversation and discussion. Again, I appreciate everyone listening in. This should be fun as we close out the book on the 2022 season and start up our 2023 off season. Once we clear some of the final steps of the season here as things get sorted out from Monday night's game. So again, thanks all for joining. Thanks all for listening. And we'll talk to you next time.